Good morning, everybody. This is Mark from the Pittsburgh Zoo and PPG Aquarium. We're actually going to do a little fun thing that we've never really done before. We're going to try to do one of our little classes that we do at the zoo for usually grades 4 through 6. We're going to try to do this for you today via a cell phone video camera. So this is a first time thing. So just bear with us. We're going to try to have a lot of fun with this. You're going to get to meet some of our animals and some of our program animals that we use for a lot of different classes. But we're going to do a class that we call Vertebrates today. And we're not going to do the whole class because if we had a lot of time to do this, we'd do the whole class. But it's only going to be about a half an hour max for this video. If we talk about vertebrates, though, that's kind of a weird word. A lot of people don't even really know what that word means. But if we think about that word vertebrates, what comes to mind? Well, maybe you think about animals that have backbones. And if you think that animals that have backbones would be considered vertebrates, you're absolutely correct. And so if you want to know if you have a backbone, you do. You can just reach behind your head. You can kind of feel it back there. It's the top of your backbone. And it runs all the way down your spinal column, right? Towards the top of your bum. It's right in that area. And that's your entire spinal cord, your spinal column. That's all your vertebrates that line up to make that happen. Not only do mammals have vertebrates, but lots of animals have vertebrates. Amphibians, fish, birds, even reptiles are all vertebrates. Some animals don't have backbones, and they're called invertebrates. Just by throwing a little question out to all of you out there, though, I want you to think about this just for a second. Do you think there's more different species of vertebrates or more species of invertebrates? Think about that just for a second. If you thought that there's more species of invertebrates, you're absolutely correct. There's more animals, species on our planet that don't have backbones than do have backbones. One of my favorite examples of that is our arachnids or spiders. And I actually brought a spider out here today that we can actually meet. And it's a tarantula, of course, so we're going to go a little bit bigger than small spiders. We're just going to see, kind of living inside that little box right there, but we're going to pull them out, put them up on my hand. This is a Chilean rose-haired tarantula. And these guys are really cool. The first thing you might, I always like to ask people, when you think of spiders, how many legs do they have? And everybody always says, well, they have 8 legs. And let's kind of count together on this one. You're going to have a weird answer that comes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Uh-oh. Well, we already know spiders have 8 legs. This one appears to have 10, but those 2 appendages that are right up front, do you see those right there? Those 2 appendages are called pedipalps. And they're not really legs. They're kind of like feelers that they feel their environment through. And it's kind of a neat concept that they have there because in the center of their head right there, in the center of their head, 8 little tiny eyes. Scientists this is really elementary kind of concept, but if something's really small on your body compared to the rest of your body, like that clump of 8 eyes, it probably doesn't really work all that well. So scientists don't think that they see all that well, but they do think that they use those giant pedipalps on the front of their body to kind of explore the world. So how does that work? It's kind of neat. So there's a bunch of different types of tarantulas on the planet, but what tarantulas do is they like to keep those pedipalps on their web. And they spin webs just like you think like Charlotte's Web. They spin those really beautiful webs. They don't spin beautiful webs, but they put webbing all on the bottom of wherever they're living. Actually, I was hoping to have some webbing in here, but there's really not. But with that webbing, what they do is they kind of make little tripwires all around a little burrow that they live in at the base of a bush or at the base of a tree. And they keep their pedipalps attached to that web. Whenever an animal comes along and walks across that web, it makes it vibrate. It's not sticky, but it makes it vibrate. And it's kind of like ringing the doorbell for that tarantula. And so they know that something's crossing their web. And they can tell based on how much it vibrates to how big that animal's is that's crossing their web. If it's a small animal, it might turn out to be something that they choose to eat. If it's a bigger animal, it might be something that they choose to kind of hunker down and hide from to make sure that it doesn't become eaten. So kind of a neat little tidbit of information there about their webbing. Another neat thing about tarantulas, and this one, if you looked up the word tarantula in a dictionary, all it says is a big spider with hair, right? And so it doesn't say anything about being venomous, but all spiders are venomous. And I know sometimes when you think about that, oh, wow, it's venomous. the first thing that you think about is, oh no, if you get bit by it, you're gonna get sick or you're gonna get hurt. And that's not true. It just means it's the way that it delivers that substance. So they're venomous. Snakes are also can be venomous. It means that they inject venom. But if I was bitten by this tarantula, it's not one of those things where I'm gonna get really sick. It does hurt a little bit. I have been bitten in the past, and it kind of feels like you were stung by a bee. And so it's not a whole lot to worry about. It's just one of those things where it's an eye opener and you go, oh boy, that kind of hurts. But this one's a Chilean rose-haired tarantula, so you'd have to go to the country of Chile in South America to find them. What's kind of neat about tarantulas in general is females tend to live a lot longer than males. So for all of our girls that might be watching, you'd rather be a tarantula if you're a girl than a boy. The girl tarantulas live to be about 20 to 25 years. Boy tarantulas usually don't live much longer than 4 years. And that's just the way that they're made. So whenever you visit the zoo, you're generally always seeing female tarantulas because we have the more robust, bigger ones. Which is kind of neat. So I'm going to put this guy back. So this is an example of an invertebrate, and now we're going to start to move into a few of our vertebrate classifications. All right. And she went back in there quite nicely. We'll give her a little house if she wants to crawl in there too. So for the purpose of this class, now if we were doing a full-blown zoo class, we'd be talking in depth about fish and amphibians, as well as birds, mammals, and reptiles. But for the purpose of this class, we're just gonna focus on the birds, mammals, and reptiles because we do have live examples of those that we can bring out. So the first one that I wanna talk about is actually, we're gonna go out of order. We're gonna go here to mammals. I'm gonna bring out a mammal that you can get to meet. And this one's kind of a weird animal in terms of where it fits in the animal kingdom because it's a little bit of an oddity. Anybody know what that is, huh? So yep, that's an armadillo. And this is a three-banded armadillo. And when they get their names from the bands on their the bands that are on the outside of their carapace here, it's 1, 2, 3. And of course, this one's from South America. It's from a country called, I think it's from Bolivia. So this guy actually lives in the rainforest. They're really, really not too secretive of animals. They're pretty bold. And the reason why they're pretty bold, and he's being a little bit active right now, the reason why they're pretty bold is they don't have to worry so much about animals coming along to eat them. And the reason why is that this outer covering, this is actually made out of bone. This is a sheet of armor for them. And this one's not doing the best example. Her name's Lucy. Lucy's not doing the best example right now, but she can roll up into a complete ball. Let's see if we can kind of, she's saying this is too much fun right now. And but she could actually roll up into a complete ball. And in doing so, it's almost impossible for animals to figure out how to consume her, even though a lot of animals would love to, for her size, or being that she is a smaller mammal. So they carry this little kind of house with them all the time. People wonder, like, do they live in burrows or do they live in nests? They live wherever they want to live because they're kind of taking their house everywhere they go. And so they kind of chase wherever the food is. These guys are really opportunistic eaters. They can eat grasses and salad-like materials, but they also eat a lot of bugs. And so I don't know if it's safe to say that they're classified as an insectivore or if they're classified as an omnivore. I'd probably go omnivore with these guys. Pretty neat. You can see these giant claws that are on the front of their feet. They use those claws to actually dig through things to find bugs or get underneath sand and leaf litter. If you want, we'll see if we can stick this guy on the floor and see if it will start to walk around. Let's see if I think she will, because all this stuff that's coming out of this too, if you can see all this stuff that's coming up, that's all part of her bedding where she lives most of the time. She doesn't stay in this carrier all the time. Oh, there she goes. And you can see that nose is searching for anything that might be bug-like or something that she would like to eat. But she's not going to find anything in this classroom. So we'll just let her go for a second and then I'll pick her back up. Oh, I'm going to head underneath our table. I'm going to go grab her now. But that's an example of one of our education program animals that's a mammal. If we go back to our vertebrates chart, though, and we start to think about what makes it a vertebrate, obviously there's the backbone that goes through the top of her back here. But you can go down the list and you can see, does she have hair? Well, she does have hair, not so much on her outer, but you can see the hair that's kind of on her belly. Does she have limbs, wings, or flippers? Well, she definitely has 4 limbs, 4 legs, just like a dog or cat at home. Is she warm-blooded? I obviously can't feel her right now, but I can feel her, and she's definitely warm-blooded. And she breathes through lungs, just like we do. So people being mammals, this armadillo is also a mammal, and she's got a little feather on her nose, coming right off. And so she fits all those different categories. And now, do mammals have live birth, or do they lay eggs? Yeah, if you said that they have live birth, almost all mammals do. They have live birth. There are an exception or two in the animal kingdom that we sometimes run into. If you think about the platypus is one that everybody always thinks about because it lays eggs. So, all right, so we're gonna move to our next vertebrate classification. Put you back in there. Might make a little bit of noise in there. All right. So our next vertebrate classification that we're going to move to is we're going to talk about we're going to talk about birds. And this is an example of one of my favorite animals at the zoo. Can you step up? Yeah. And when I say my favorite animal, this is an animal that I've worked with for, well over 10 years. This is Napoleon. He's our blue and gold macaw. And he is a vertebrate species as well. So he does have a backbone that runs down the back of his back. He doesn't weigh much at all. He's a big bird, but he looks like he might weigh a lot more than he does. He's inside his body. If you took away those feathers, there's really not a whole lot of animal there. They're much, much smaller if you take away their feathers. If you ever see a bird skeleton, you can see that after that, those feathers are taken off. There's not a lot of bird there. His bones aren't, they're not filled with marrow, which makes him very light as well. They're actually filled with a kind of a fibrous material that makes them very, very light. Some people say birds have hollow bones. That's not entirely accurate. They do have some of this fibrous material in them, but they're incredibly light, and they have to be incredibly light if they're a species of bird that flies, right? Macaws do fly. One of the first things that people always ask me about Napoleon, and it might be what you're thinking about at home right now, is does he talk? And the real answer is no, he doesn't talk. He does something a little bit different. He does something that's called mimicking. And mimicking is kind of, it's almost like talking, but it's saying that he can make the noise that he heard, but he doesn't really necessarily comprehend what it means. So talking would mean that we could have a conversation back and forth, and I guarantee you that he's not going to have a conversation back and forth with me. He does noises that are very, very familiar, but he does that because it's just how he's wired or how he's made up. In the wild, being able to mimic other things can actually be an aid to his survival. And researchers have seen macaws actually, they mimic the sounds of their predators often. And in his case, it might be an animal like a jaguar that's kind of sneaking up a tree, or maybe a harpy eagle. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they're huge. Harpy eagles would love to eat macaws. And so what macaws, they're a species of animals that live in giant flocks, sometimes of 100 or more. But when macaws hear a harpy eagle, they'll oftentimes mimic that noise right away, and they'll make the noise of the harpy eagle. Now you have 100 macaws that are all part of this group that they all start making the noise of a harpy eagle. If you can imagine, at that point, there's not a chance that that harpy eagle is going to have an opportunity to predate a macaw at that point, because they're all scared and they're going to fly into the nooks and crannies of the rainforest. And it works out pretty well as a survival strategy for him. So in captivity, we oftentimes hear macaws make noises that are very familiar. In his case, he's very, very familiar with a lot of different noises, some better than others. One of the noises that he does that drives me absolutely crazy is if I'm working around him, sometimes he'll make the noise of his cage door opening and closing. And when he makes that noise, it has a little bit of a squeak. And every time he makes that noise, I go just like this. I go, and I look right at him. And that's exactly what he wanted me to do. And so that's an example of how an animal can actually train the trainer, right? Which is kind of funny. And some other noises that he makes, he sometimes laughs. And I'm not going to laugh right now in his presence because sometimes he starts getting into little hysterical fits. And but he kind of goes, ha 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 kind of thing. And once you get started, it's hard to get him off at different times. He says the word hello, and that's one that he used to do a lot. Just randomly, he'd see somebody, he would say hello. But why would he do that? Well, he would say hello because instantly somebody would say hello back to him. So he just trained that visitor just like that. And in his mind, that's exactly what he wanted to see. Now we isolated that behavior due to the skills of our very talented animal care team. They've trained him to say hello for a treat. And I actually think I have a treat in my pocket. Did I get any this morning? I did. And for the cost of a very small sunflower seed, we can get him to say hello usually. Let's see if we can get him to do it right now. Will you say hello? You say hello? Oh, you're going to embarrass me now, huh? You're going to say hello? Say hello. Hello. There you go. And so instead of him saying hello because he wants you to say hello back, now he says hello because he wants to be rewarded with that small little sunflower treat, which is pretty cool. Now, if we go back to our vertebrates chart, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to move my chair too quickly for you, but if we go back to our vertebrate chart, you can see birds, obviously for their body covering, they're covered in feathers, right? Are all birds covered in feathers, even penguins? Yeah, even penguins are all covered in feathers. So every bird out there is covered in feathers. Can they all fly? No, penguins can't fly, ostriches can't fly, emus can't fly. And those are the ones that have that marrow in their bones, and they don't have that fibrous light material that makes them light. Wings and legs, of course, all birds have wings and legs. Even that ostrich has little tiny wings. We go a little bit further down. Are they warm-blooded? Absolutely, they're very much warm-blooded. Even those penguins that live in Antarctica are very much warm-blooded. And they lay eggs, and they breathe through lungs, right? And they also have little air sacs that are in there that help in that process as well. All right, so one of the neat things that I like about him is when I said that he's my favorite animal, or one of my favorite animals, it's because he kind of acts like a 4-year-old. And so if any of you guys have little brothers or sisters at home, you might think, well, what's he mean, acts like a 4-year-old? Well, when I say acts like a 4-year-old, 4-year-olds are almost always wonderful. And if any 4-year-olds are watching, they're almost always wonderful. But every once in a while, you get overwhelmed and things get kind of crazy. And he does the same thing. And so he lets me know when he's getting overwhelmed and he's getting a little bit crazy by doing some really funny things. He'll take the buttons off my shirt. He'll go, bing, and just rip a button right off my shirt, or he'll tug at my shirt, or at the collar of my shirt or sleeve of my shirt, just to let me know. He said, I'm getting overwhelmed, and that's his little indication to me that he needs to take a little break. All right, right now he's doing really good. He's having a lot of fun. All right, so I'm going to put him back up on his perch. So this is a North American alligator, and there's only 2 different species of alligators on the planet. There's the American alligator, and there's the Chinese alligator, and there's a bunch of different crocodilians, but just 2 species of alligators. Obviously, this guy's not full-grown. I can't handle a full-grown American alligator, and if you can imagine, a full-grown alligator is going to top out 12 feet, maybe even 14 feet long, which is, quite big if you think about a basketball hoop being 10 feet high. 12 feet high is even higher than that. This guy's still relatively young, just a year and a half or 2 years old, which means that we can still kind of keep our hands on them and they're handleable. But they're starting to realize that as they grow, they start to realize that they are alligators and they become a little bit more of a handful to handle. This one's really well behaved. This one's name's Mindy, and we have 2 of them in our education department. We have Mork and Mindy. And for anybody that grew up in the 70s, there's a TV show called Mork and Mindy. It was a little sitcom, and so sometimes we get a little silly when we name animals. They have some really cool adaptations going on, alligators do, and this is an animal that's really uniquely adapted to the environment that it lives in. Most of an alligator's day is spent doing 2 things. It's either out in the sun and it's sunning itself, trying to stay warm, or it's in the water, right, with only its snout and its eyeballs above the water. And that's more of a hunting phase for them that they have as they wait for something to come along that they can take down and eat. Alligators are built extremely tough. They have 2 different types of scales on their bodies. They have these scales on their back. These are called osteoderms. And if we were a scientist, we could break that word down. Osteo means bony, derm means scale. So they have these bony scales on their back, and that's like a sheet of armor for them. Alligators don't usually end up getting hurt through their back. They do have softer scales on their belly, and these ones very similar to snake scales. Those are called scutes, right? And those are softer scales. And so alligators are a little bit more protective towards their belly than they are their back. If you look at them, they're very good swimmers. They're very well adapted to the camouflage. They have those colors that really kind of look like that murky kind of swamp water or marsh water that you'd find in the southeastern United States, where they're really, really prevalent. Their strongest body part's really not their mouth, although they can really strong closing down that way. They're not very strong opening up their mouth this way, and it doesn't take any effort whatsoever to hold its mouth shut. But if my finger was actually in between the top and bottom jaws right now, it would be quite hard to get it back out because they can chomp down really, really hard, even when they're at a young age. But this one's really not interested in biting me, so there's no real concern about that. A couple neat things that also kind of come into this is alligators, when they're young, they oftentimes call for their moms, which is really almost unique in the reptile kingdom. Most reptiles, once they're born, they're on their own. There's really no parental care. Alligator moms will stick around their nest and wherever their baby alligators are, and they'll actually kind of protect them in the process. And baby alligators can make little calls towards their mom. I'm going to really embarrass myself when I try to make this call, but it's sort of a ow, ow, ow noise. And whenever mom hears that, she'll oftentimes swim over, open up her mouth, and carry her babies, or just one or more, in her mouth, take them to a safer location, or what she perceives to be a safer location, and let them back out. And then whatever threat bothered those little babies in the beginning is now taken care of. Alligators are really kind of cool in the way that they do have their young. And we can go through this list in a second. We can look at our vertebrate list. But whenever alligator moms lay their eggs, they lay different. They have different temperatures for their eggs to hatch at. And sometimes, they almost self-regulate their population. So if there's too many girls in a population or too many boys in a population, they bury their eggs or they put it closer to the surface based on what they're trying to achieve to kind of equal out that population. And it's really kind of amazing how this happens, because inside the head of an alligator is a really tiny small brain. And so instinctively, somehow they can figure out how to manage their population to make sure that there's a similar number of males and females. But whenever they do lay their eggs, eggs that are buried further into the nest, further down into the ground, are hatching further away from the surface of the ground, so they hatch at a cooler temperature. And every time those eggs hatch at a cooler temperature, they always turn out to be girls, which is kind of a neat thing, you know. And then any eggs that are hatched at a warmer temperature, closer to the surface of the nest, always turn out to be males. And so they self-regulate their populations based on, you know, how they lay those eggs, deeper or more shallow into the nest, which is kind of neat. One of my favorite adaptations, I'll just do this one really quick. Inside their head, they have an expanded eye socket that actually goes all the way back into their head. And so their eye can go all the way back into their skull, and then it just pops back out. And that's a really important adaptation for alligators, because alligators do rely on their sight as a very primary rule for hunting. And so a blind alligator would have a very difficult time being able to find food. So nature's just made it that if they got kicked in the eye whenever they were trying to eat something, that their eye can actually go back into their head. Therefore, they preserves their vision for the next time that they need to hunt, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to take him, actually I'll hold him while we talk about our list again. But if we go back to our vertebrates list, and we can see what makes a reptile. Is it covered in scales? Yep, we talked about those scales, the osteoderms on the back and the scutes on the belly. Legs, flippers, or no appendages. Well, this guy definitely has those legs. And then we're going to go a little further down. We talk about ectothermic animals, right? Another word for cold-blooded animals. And what does that mean? That's just another way that some animals have been adapted to survive. So this guy doesn't have to generate its own body heat, which means that it gets all of its heat from the air that surrounds its environment and the sun, right? And so in doing so, that's a real great thing in terms of an animal not having to consume a lot of calories to survive. So an alligator can go literally weeks without eating as long as it's not moving much because its calorie needs are so low. It doesn't have to warm its body. Almost everything that we eat from breakfast and lunch and dinner, all that food that we eat goes to burning calories. We burn those calories to maintain our 98.6 degrees that we need to survive. Reptiles don't need to do that. And of course, when we go to the last one, where for birthing strategies, they can either lay eggs or they can have live birth. We talked about the alligator, definitely has those eggs that it lays, but there's some species of snakes that have live birth, and usually in terms of like snakes, once those babies are born, there's no parental care. Alligators seem to be quite the exception to that rule for reptiles and taking care of their young. So that's our vertebrate class, kind of in a nutshell. It was kind of a quick class. We hope that this kind of, gave you a little bit of entertainment on your day. Maybe even learned a little bit of something, or learned a little bit along the way. But we want to make sure that we're able to connect with you guys while you're away from school and not able to come to the zoo. And so this is one of the ways that we're going to try to do this over the next few days. So come back soon, and hopefully you can get to meet some more of the education animals and the programs that we do. Thank you.